Hey, I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to Music is Everything, episode number 16. This is the podcast where I take a musical idea, thought, concept, fact, belief, opinion. I discuss it verbatim from something I've written and then off the cuff afterwards and relate it not just to ideas in music, but to ideas in the rest of life. If you like this podcast or my other podcast, Music is Not a Genre, or any of the live or recorded music on this channel, please take a moment to subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And or if you know someone you think would be interested in what I do, either in this podcast, the other, or any of my live music or recorded music, please take a moment to share the link to my channel with them or to share any of these videos with them. I would really appreciate that. So this week, if you saw my Thursday podcast, you will know that I'm doing a mini series of podcasts, all based around one idea. And this is the second one. This is part 2 of what I'm calling the illusion episodes. It's all about illusion and trickery in art, and I have to do that contractually with my fingers. That's part of it. And each week, which I don't know how many weeks that's going to be, it's going to be more than 2. That's all I know. Each week we'll deal with a slightly different facet of that idea, but will overlap. Okay. So, brief introduction. I talked about this on Thursday. Let me just go over it very, very quickly if I can. This time around, there are different ways that fakery and art is used, deliberately, not deliberately, in the art itself, in the presentation of the art, in who's doing the art, etc., etc. The basic concept is that all art is somehow fake, and all art is also somehow real. And that's what all of these episodes are touching on one way or another. So, as always, I'm going to get to what I've written here, and then we can discuss it afterwards. And we're listening for your comments. So, this week, that song is so real. No, it's not. The Illusion episodes, part 2. Every artist gets there. For some, it's a departure from their normal mode. For some, it is their mode. For some, it's a concession to age. For some, it's a defiant statement of not being pigeonholed or thought of as less serious. You know the moment I'm talking about. When an artist writes and records that extra special, heartfelt confessional, that song that reveals something truer and more personal about them. And I'm here to tell you, it's bullshit. If you watch my podcast on Thursday, you'll know that this is the second of several episodes I'm doing that deal with illusion in art, specifically in music. This one has to do with the idea that the way a song is crafted and recorded tells us something about its content. This is an illusion. It's one of many forms of trickery that all artists employ for effect. I mentioned on Thursday that art is artifice. That no matter how true a work is, it's still crafted. The word craft itself is used all the time to indicate trickery. Think of witchcraft. When you make up a song, that song is made up, which can also mean it's not real. So many words having to do with art also somehow mean not true. Even the word create means form from nothing. Nothing, meaning something not real. Okay, so let's get back to the main point here. That how a song sounds indicates how true or deep it is. This really is total and complete bullshit. I can tell you as both a listener and a creator that the style, or let's even say genre, of a song is a full-on illusion. That's why I always say music is not a genre, because genres are illusions. That was an aside. Do certain types of instrumentation better convey certain emotional intentions? Yes. Do artists hope to make listeners feel a certain way by how they produce their songs? Absolutely. Does that mean the lyrics in those songs have the same emotional content or the same perceived level of depth or the same intended meaning? No fucking way. There are thousands of examples of songs that sound one way and have lyrics that go a completely different way. or songs whose deepness goes as far as how they sound and whose lyrics don't really measure up, deliberately or not. The style of a song is its clothing, its skin. It's not the guts and bones. In fact, many artists get a real kick out of this kind of misdirection, this kind of illusion. For one, it's just fun to mess with people, to buck expectations, to surprise. For another, that juxtaposition adds a whole other level of meaning. It forces the listener to actually listen, to not be fooled by the surface. Lots of songs with amazing lyrics often get short shrift because they're produced in a way that doesn't immediately convey deep meaning. Pop songs, rock songs, dance songs, power pop, hard songs that hide sensitive lyrics, and vice versa. The surface judgments miss the truth, miss the real substance. Sound familiar? We ruin our discourse, our ability to connect with each other, by judging people based on how they look or how they talk, instead of paying attention to what they're doing or saying. How often have you heard someone with a certain accent or dialect and immediately dismissed them as dumb or incapable of meaningful conversation, or on the other side, too cold, too proper, too intellectual? Or how often have you been fooled by someone's appearance, assumed they're rough or suspicious, or alternatively trustworthy and knowledgeable, based on how they dress or what their skin or facial features look like? We all do it. It's in all of us to snap judge based on appearances and verbal expression, whether that means we unfairly denigrate or lionize. What's important, especially now, is that we are self-aware enough to first acknowledge this when it happens and then move on and beyond it. To really see and hear someone based on their true substance. To take a moment to reflect on what's actually being said or done, not on what we think it looks like or how our senses make us feel. The more we can stop and look and listen, the more we'll find those commonalities that a faster reaction will completely run over and miss. The more we get past that false instinct of snap judgment, the more we will connect with people who we'll find are way more like us than we ever could have known. So surface, right? Don't judge a book by its cover, the whole thing. That's kind of what this is. I think it goes a little further than that in a way. Or maybe that saying itself goes further, right? I have notes here, and they're not a complete everything that I would want to say, but, to start off just reading what it says there, used car salesman, right? So that's always used as an example of somebody who is well-dressed, well-spoken, but slimy underneath. Right? This can be applied to many politicians and to many people, higher ups in corporations, even people who aren't so high up. There are people who, it's the wolf in sheep's clothing idea. It's all that stuff. It's that, appearances do not necessarily dictate what's going on underneath, the substance, right? In a musical sense, what that is, again, is the idea of genre and why I'm so against pigeonholing things into genres. First of all, because they're very slippery. You could classify something as one genre, hear it slightly differently, then all of a sudden it adds another genre, then on, and it just slips the slippery slope into something completely different. But secondly, because it gives, I think, a person the false impression that what they're going to hear is X, right? Like, for example, perfect example, as a matter of fact. Have you ever actually listened to Ozzy Osbourne's lyrics? They have a lot to do, and I don't mean, like, current lyrics I don't know as well, but I think that they apply as well. They have a lot to do with self-reflection, inner turmoil, thinking about, certain big picture things in life and understanding what's important and things like that. And this is very, very, very real simplification of all of it. But even the songs that seemingly have to do with something dark or sinister, if you listen to the lyrics, they're really in some ways very insightful, and just they're very connected to his own personal experience. So here's a perfect example of how this type of music, heavy metal, is perceived as insensitive, as harsh, as aggressive, as evil in some ways. And some of it is, and some of it's meant to be, and that's the intention. But so much of it, and not honestly just Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne, but even Judas Priest, another great example. These lyrics are much more introspective than that, and much more heartfelt, and in some ways actually very positive if you're really, you're really getting into them. Another example, I've used this before, but I'm going to say it again because it's the first one that comes to mind. Actually, I'll use I'll use this example, the Smiths and Morrissey, right? So a lot of what they did, not everything, but a lot of what they did had very peppy, happy sound to it. That kind of jangly indie pop, indie rock sound, right? If you know them at all, you know that their lyrics were mostly pretty freaking depressing, pretty sad, pretty, in some ways very jaded even. Like one of my favorite songs of theirs is Panic, and the whole thing is panic on the streets of London, blah, blah, blah. At the end, the repeated line is hang the DJ. It's a really happy sounding song, and one you want to get up and dance to. Lyrics don't say anything about that. They're honestly the exact opposite. And that is a version of trickery. It's a version of drawing the listener in one way and hoping that they get something else out of it completely, So those are some concrete examples as I have on my notes. Jeepers. I think that the idea of it, that juxtaposition creating new meaning. You think of it this way, right? Let's go back to Panic from the Smiths, a very happy sounding song with those really harsh lyrics. Well, maybe you think then that there's a certain joy in defiance, a certain joy in bucking, trends and the status quo and the, what was going on in London and Britain at the time with Margaret Thatcher and all of that stuff, like taking joy in this harshness or negativity, right? With, let's say, Ozzy Osbourne's lyrics, let's go with them. As positive as they might be, or on the other hand, as maybe introspective as they might be, insensitive, there's a certain shield that the music puts up. There's a certain level of angst that the music creates that really, I think, is part and parcel of having those feelings anyway. A lot of times, to get to a place of positivity, you got to go through a lot of shit. And so the music was essentially the shit that was taking you to the positivity. So there's that juxtaposition there. And that is another form of kind of illusion or trickery, Again, I'm going to do this hand thing or some version of it every time I say the word illusion. It's just going to happen. So just live with it, right? As far as real life, so I touched on the used car salesman idea, right? But I think what many of you might be hearing, and hopefully you are, if you're tuned in to not just what I'm saying, but what's going on in the world and what has been going on in the world for a very long time, has to do with ideas of class and race, right? Class and race as pertains not just to our prejudices, prejudgments was what they are, and to appearances, or we might, judge someone based on the color of their skin, et cetera, et cetera. But also how a person sounds. And let's go both ways, because I think it's important to illustrate that this happens everywhere. I am admitting, like I said, we all do this, that there are times, not all the time, but there are times when I hear someone with a thick Southern accent, and my first kind of snap judgment is whatever they're saying is not going to have any great meaning or intelligence, right? Now, again, I'm self-aware enough to know that I'm prejudging that based on everything, that came before in my life and in society. But then I take that moment and say, well, let's listen to what that person's really saying. Now, honestly, sometimes it is really dumb, but there are very often many times where it is as insightful or introspective or thoughtful or intelligent as anybody speaking in British or new, accent or some other posh accent. And And it's important to note that, because it's easy to dismiss people based on how they sound, not just how they look. On the other hand, and this is something I think that is so damn common that it's making a lot of people sick. People in the African American community, from various regions of the country, often speak with certain accents and dialects that automatically identify them in many ways from that area of the country, from that group of people, that class of people. And there are a lot of people in this world who hear that, either the accent or the mode in which they're speaking. Maybe it's a little louder or something like that, and they immediately think this person is dumb or aggressive or dangerous or anything like that. And I mean, a couple things to say about that. First of all, it's very similar to the first example I gave, except that in terms of society and politics and power, it's, I think, way more damaging, and it's done more damage to this country and this world. Not dismissing, the other example at all, but I do believe that's true. And the other thing to say is, again, to say that we all do it, right? I grew up in a place that had different people from different cultures, so I wasn't completely sheltered. But in 2008, I moved my family to Harlem. And they're actually still there. I'm living elsewhere now, but they're all still there, my kids and all. And, there was no feeling, I want to say this honestly, there was no feeling of danger or we're not going to be accepted, nothing like that. First of all, most of New York isn't like that. But second of all, I've been in the city long enough to know and get a feel for people and areas and everything. And honestly, there was a more neighborhood and welcoming feel and is in Harlem than in many of the other places that I've lived in my life. So that wasn't it, right? But having grown up with having been friends with certain, some African American people, and then gone to school with them and worked with them and all of that, and then also, culturally, just seeing, like Eddie Murphy and Richard. And oh, geez, my mind's blank. And then so many musicians and people, African American descent. And a certain way that they present themselves or speak, which again is not a blanket thing, but Eddie Murphy would purposely put on different accents to kind of be funny, honestly, in as many ways, and kind of tell stories about his life and his experience and stuff like that. And some of them were deliberate cliches and all of that. Now, I knew that, right? Doesn't mean everybody knows, and doesn't mean I knew it about everything, but I'm saying I knew specifically that. But, going to Harlem, and you hear a certain way of speaking on the street, you hear a certain way of interacting and all of that. And it did take me a little while to just stop and listen. And when I did, I realized that, no, not everyone's experience is the same, and people, have different struggles and stuff like that. But on an everyday basis, the majority of what anybody anywhere was talking about could have been anything that any of my family or friends would say. And looking beyond that dialect, that accent, looking beyond the maybe, louder way of speaking, once I heard that, let me tell you, my experience of Harlem and the world changed completely. Because you have a firsthand experience of being able to listen to people who speak differently than you, look differently than you do, and understanding that so much of what they're saying and doing is just so not different, right? In fact, and I say this all the time, and I know it's a funny parallel, it's not meant to be that serious, but I come from a partly Italian family, and they're very loud. We would be very loud at home, my brother and I, with my parents, and most of the time, it had nothing to do with anger or frustration or aggression. This is how we spoke. This is how we communicated, right? So, for us to think that there's a certain type of communication that's only indigenous to one class or group of people, it itself is ridiculous. But even if overall people from another country who are speaking English speak in a certain way, or from another part of this country speak in a certain way, We need to be smarter than that. We need to be more thoughtful than that. We need to be more patient than that. We need to be more open and listening than just taking that initial snap judgment, because I'm telling you, I know from firsthand experience, hundreds and thousands of times, that the vast majority of those times, what was being said or done was something that was extremely common to me, to the people I know, to the people I'm related to the people I grew up with, to the people who I see as quote unquote more like me. And those people who we don't see as like ourselves are just way more like us than we realize. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading, if you did. Thank you for clicking and sharing and subscribing. I want to know everything that you have to think about and say about all of this, whether you agree or disagree, whether you love it or hate it. I want to know all of it, because as always, my objectives are music, conversation, and connection. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.